speak with us. We've got a great field running in the congressional race. You couldn't ask for a better slate of candidates. And tonight we've got Mr. Meadows who's going to speak with us for a little bit and maybe take a question or two. And then we've got some other candidates that are here that we'll recognize. And Bart, if you want to come on up. Let's give Bart a big Caldwell County.
Well, it's good to be back with you. Actually, a little bit of trivia for some of you that have just met me tonight. This very room was the room where I gave my first speech in terms of when we started our congressional run. I actually we had a homemade banner that I've kept in the back of my car to remind me that people are willing to sacrifice on their own to help you for a worthwhile cause. And I just want to thank each and every one of you. This makes our 31st time of being in Caldwell County. And I apologize for my voice. We've been all over today, and we'll be headed out. We've got meet and greets next week in Avery and Mitchell and Burke County the following week. And so, but I'm here tonight to just share a little bit about our vision. I'm not going to give the same stump speech because I've been here 31 times now, and so some of you would be able to recite it better than I can. And so as I do that, I do want to make sure that you know that the battle that we're fighting is certainly worthwhile fighting. It's going to take lots of personal sacrifice. Quite frankly, Jeff Hunt's here tonight, and he'll echo the fact that we spend more time on the road than we do at home these days. And back in September, they were calling it a marathon. We have now entered into the sprint stage. And so for the next 4 months, we'll be going just as fast as we can to make sure that we reach as many people as we possibly can. Here in Caldwell County, I've shared with you many times, I believe that we've got to make sure that we have representation as far east as we do far west. And I want to take just an opportunity to thank local government, because when government does something well, we need to applaud it. And I understand that we announced today, or yesterday today, 150 new jobs that were coming to this area that the people of Caldwell County need to rejoice about. And I just want to thank the
Let's rejoice.
To be able to create new jobs in this environment is all about getting government out of the way and making sure that government is not the problem. And quite frankly, for far too long, government has been the problem. And I stand for less government, less involvement in your life from a federal standpoint. I've shared many times that what happens is when we get out there from a federal point of view, they all think that they have the answers for you, don't they? And they want to tell you exactly how to spend your money wisely, don't they? They take the money from you and then they make great purchases. I shared with Heath Schuler has voted to take the San Joaquin River Valley, and I shared it with some of you, and move it back to its original place. Now, the state of California originally moved it where it would irrigate other things. And now it's going to be the federal tax dollars that moves it back to its original spot to save 500 salmon. Now, it comes at the cost of $22 million per fish. And I'm a great outdoorsman. I love to fish, but I have never caught anything that was worth $22 million. And so I'd say we need to throw that back. That's not a keeper. And the only way to make sure that we do that is to send Heath Schuler home in 2012 is when we're going to do that. It's amazing when you get running for office how many forwards and emails you start to get, and you start to get all these forwards. How many of you have gotten a forward or two in the last day or so? Now, how many of you know that anything that you read on the internet that you can always believe? But as we look at that, one of the things that these forwards start to come is it can really get you pretty paranoid very quickly, because as you start to realize what we're doing in our government is we're essentially taking the authority and turning it over to a few people, and we're taking it away from we the people. And so what we need to make sure of is that we stand up we hold our government officials accountable, but we also make sure that we have good policy going forward. One of the things that we've come up with, and is I want you to remember this, is a 2020 plan. Now, I haven't shared this publicly too much at this point, but how many of you know when you see clearly, it's 2020? So if you just remember, if we're going to see clearly, we're going to have a 2020 plan. Now, all of them have all kinds of different numbers, but our 2020 plan is really for job growth and economic growth. And as we look at this, it starts out with making sure that we take corporate income taxes and reduce it to 20%. What that will do is make us competitive in the world market. Right now, we have the highest corporate income tax in the world. Japan's a little bit higher, but they're reducing theirs, and so ours at an effective rate of 29% makes sure that it's more effective for us to start jobs over in Ireland than it is here. And there's something wrong with that, so we need to make sure that we do that. We also need to put a moratorium on new regulations and reduce those. And until we reduce them by 20%, we don't pass any more regulatory law until they've done that. We put a moratorium on that. You know, it's amazing. I'm in the development business, and you know, when things get slow, you would think regulation would get easier. But really what it does is it gets more and more and more. We've got a guy that comes out now on a monthly basis to check and see about soil erosion on our piece of property. And I said, you know, I was talking to him the other day. I said, you know, you work for the government. You used to come out once every 6 months or once every 9 months or whatever the case may be. You know, we saw you one time a year. He said, yeah, but we don't have many projects going on, so now I'm coming every month to check on you. Now, that's government efficiency for you, and instead of and coming in and making sure that we're in compliance. So what we need to do is make sure that we reduce that regulation. For a period of 20 months, the other 20 would be, is to make sure that we allow the $1.25 trillion that's expatriate brought in without tax consequences as long as it's invested in job creation here. Now, what we do is some people say, well, gosh, that's giving a tax break to all the wealthy. Well, let me give you an example. GE made $14 billion last year. And out of the $14 billion, you know how much taxes they paid? Zero. All right, why was that? $9 billion of it was overseas, and they're just leaving it there. Another $5 billion of it was subsidized with the solar energy in terms of green renewable energy. So they paid zero taxes on $14 billion. And so what we need to do is make sure that there's an incentive for them to bring that money that they're leaving over in Europe back and create American jobs. All right? The other thing, the next 20 that we've got is to make sure that we become less dependent on foreign oil. Part of our problem is, in economics, is truly an energy problem. If you will think back, when our president came into power in 2008, a gallon of gas was less than $2. It was actually $1.82, I think. And so today, we're paying twice that amount. And yet he's concerned about the poor and the middle class. I mean, when you go to fill up your tank and you're spending $40 or $50 more a week, you know, is that not a burden? So what we need to make sure of is that we reduce our foreign dependency on oil by 20% by the year 2020. Now, what is that going to require? We're going to have to start drilling. We're going to have to drill. And what we're also going to have to do is explore for natural gas. We've got some of the largest natural gas deposits in the world right here within our confines. But yet what we continue to do is to do what? Import oil from Saudi Arabia or Iran or whatever, and invest in technology in other places. Why would the Obama administration loan money to create a refinery when we don't even allow refineries to be built here because of regulations in the United States? Why? Because we're going to get to import gasoline from Brazil or some other place. Does that make sense? Why do we do that? You know, and yet what we look at is we look at government and we say, well, government's our answer. I have never found anything that government on a federal level, other than defending our country, does well. How many of you can cite examples of things that our federal government doesn't do well? A few. All right. How many of you just want to go to Washington to work there? I don't either. You know, here's the interesting thing is as we start to look at this, and when we go up there, one of the things that we need to make sure of is that we make Washington, D.C. as limited in our lives as we possibly can. And it gets back to returning the power to the local level. Why? Because you face them in the grocery store, and if they don't vote the way that you want them to vote, what happens?
You say something.
You say something to them, you vote them out of office, or you give them what I call the GOP stare. You know, it's one of those. And so as you get that, what happens is as you start to look at it, we need to hold them accountable. You know, we look at education, and I've asked you, how many of you have had children or grandchildren in school? Most of you. All right. How many of you have gotten calls from the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. to ask you how your children were doing? But yet they think they know what's best for your children, don't they? How many of you believe that they could even name your children? How many of you think that they know that they're better with math or science or spelling or what? You know, here we somehow think that when you go to Washington, D.C., they become Karnak and they all of a sudden know all the answers. But how many of you know who Karnak is? Most of us are old enough to remember that, all right? But as we look at that, when we start to see it, what we've got to make sure of is that we limit the role of government in Washington, D.C. Does it have a role? Yes, it does. We know from the Federalist Papers that what they said was that it needed to be a role where it limited their role, but also provided a good foundation for the United States. As we look at this, one of the things is it's real easy to give up. And I'm going to close with this story. It's real easy to think that you don't make a difference. I know there have been many times where I say, well, I'm just one person. What can I do? As we looked at running for this office, I called a congressman and I said, you know, can one person really make a difference? And what he told me, he says, no, one by himself can't. But one with a group of 40 or 50 others can make a big difference. You know, I see a large crowd here today, probably one of the biggest crowds in an executive committee as we've gone across this district that I've seen. And so I want to applaud you for being active. I know that you are all of one mind and that you believe exactly the same as your neighbor does, right? Yeah. I see a few shaking their heads no. As we look at this, one of the things that we have to do, though, is make sure that we work together to make sure that Obama is not our next president, to make sure that Purdue is not our next governor, and Lord willing that Heath Shuler is not our next congressman. Because if we do that,